I'm from West Auckland, New Zealand. I started tattooing in 2001. I got interested after my nana passed away, and I got a tattoo of her. And after that, just kind of got super interested and kind of rolled on from there and doing my own thing. But before that, I was at art school. I went to White Cliffs College of Arts and Design for 4 years and got my Bachelor of Fine Arts. And as soon as I graduated, I went into tattooing. I do photorealism or realism. I've always kind of done realism when I do artwork ever since I was a kid. So it was just an easy transition for me to change from painting into tattooing and just be able to create what I see. My creative process is pretty much all to do with image search and image references. Like being able to find the perfect photo for me is the main thing when it comes to creating a piece. Whether or not that means multiple pieces and putting them together or just a portrait, it's just all about image searching, and breaking up the process. Now it's kind of like second nature, I suppose. I don't really think about much. It all just kind of happens, but there's definitely a procedure in finding the best photo, making sure it's going to fit the spot, everything like that. Not really. The only thing that changes is image selection when it comes to color or black and gray. If it's black and gray, I'm looking for the best contrast, whereas if it's color, I'm also looking for that, but also looking for warm or cool color selection or selective color tones that I think are going to look good in skin. So that is the only difference between tattoos. The most important things I consider when I start a tattoo would be contrast, making sure that the image has enough contrast that it's going to last, it has perfect blacks, it has pure whites. Also, whether the tattoo is going to fit the space and it has to kind of flow with the body, or if you're doing something small in a large area, it's always kind of a better thing to fill the area and think about the body when you're placing tattoos. Majority of the time I do hand stencils, so I print out a photo and draw with a pen over the top of the photo. This for me just makes me get a little bit more familiar with the image and the size of everything, and it helps me become more familiar when I'm tattooing it as well. I don't need to look back and forth to the stencil too much. But sometimes I also do digital stencils. This just makes it easier if I'm doing multiple sessions. I can print out the stencil multiple times and have it saved in a file, and makes it easier to kind of sort it out between clients as well. Most of the time I use Electrum, but sometimes if my stencil is too detailed and the lines are too close together, I use Stencil Anchored. For me, the Electrum is probably the best product on the market. It just can blur sometimes if everything's too close together, and sometimes you can put a little bit too much on and it'll ruin the back of my stencil. So if it's a simpler stencil but nice and large, I'll always use Electrum. If it's something small and really fine detail, I use Stencil Anchored. I have a couple. Before I stencil, I always clean the skin with alcohol. This takes away all the oil and helps to dry the skin out. And after you've applied it, you can also spray a towel with plain water and press it over the top, and this will take off all the excess stencil stuff and dry your stencil really quickly. When I place a stencil, I'm pretty much just looking for if it fits the shape of the part that it's on. Like muscle structure or something like that. The portrait, if it's a portrait, it kind of needs to be sitting on something flat, so like the front of a forearm, side of a leg, somewhere where the muscles are flat. Anywhere that's too distorting or moves too much, like ribs and stuff, isn't the best placement. If it's a free-flowing image like a tree or something like this, something that doesn't matter if it distorts too much, then of course flowing it to like ribs or something like that will work a lot better. For me, the key to get really bright saturation in skin is all about the speed in which you tattoo it. It needs to be not deep, it needs to be nice and shallow, but really slow and really well saturated and packed into the skin. If you don't pack it into the skin properly, it's going to disperse in the skin over time a lot faster. When I'm tattooing, I always mix in the needle, so I'll always dip between different color pots to mix colors. I'll never mix before the tattoo. This way I get to kind of create it as I'm going, and it means that every mix is slightly different, so nothing's ever going to be super similar. For me, when I'm mixing colors, it's about a difference between the color next to it, making sure that the colors aren't too similar, because then they're going to heal too similar. And it's also about tone, whether it's warm or cool. You need to make sure you achieve the right tone in order to create the right color for the piece. Usually going from light to dark doesn't really work for me. I'll always do all my dark colors first. This way I avoid staining all my lighter colors, and it means my light colors stay true and fresh to what they're supposed to look like. If you do darks after lights, you tend to kind of stain them a little bit, and they'll dull out and kind of look a little bit muddy compared to what they should look like. There's a couple ways you can get smooth color transitions. One of them is by color gradients, so you can go from light to dark or dark to light, but slowly mixing down as you fade. Or it's with needle saturation, so depending on how much the skin is saturated. So you can go really solid in one area and start getting kind of looser and have it slowly fade out with one color, and then you can fade the next color into that and do the same thing, and they'll blend in the middle. This is all to do with contrast, so if there's a lot of darks, then the brighter colors and lighter colors are going to stand out a lot more. If there's not a lot of blacks and not a lot of dark colors, it's going to fall really flat and mutual. So I think the best way to make your colors really vibrant and really pop is to have dark colors. Color packing is something that every tattooist really needs to know, and it's simply just to do with speed of your needle in your hand. If you want to be able to pack something really solid, you need to be able to move really slow in an area without overworking it, but make sure every bit of the skin is solid. Sometimes round shaders can be better than mags in order to pack areas. It may take a lot longer, but it'll definitely be a lot more solid and vibrant. I use the Injector Flight Nano. I've been using Injector for about 4 years now, and for me it's the best machine to do color realism. It is the right amount of soft and hard and fast, but doesn't create trauma. For me it's the only way I'm able to do what I do. If I was to layer and do color layers with other machines I've tried out, they tend to damage the surface of the skin quite a lot and be a little bit too rough. Whereas I find the Injector's super smooth running and just allows me to layer in the skin without damaging it. I use the same 4 needles for every single tattoo I do. I use Cheyenne cartridges, and I use a 5-round liner, a 7-round shader, a 7 mag soft edge, and a 15 mag soft edge. And I use each needle for each job it does. Like the 7-round shader is mainly for texture application. The 7 Magnum soft edge will be used for like packing in small areas and a little bit of texture application. 15 soft edge Magnum is always used for big backgrounds or blocking in larger areas, and the 5 liner is used for just tightening up areas, little details, things like that. I keep my machine at the same speed throughout the entire tattoo. I use 11 volts and I keep it at that for the whole piece. For me, I just change the depth of the needle and the speed in which I tattoo. So it becomes a lot more easier for me to apply certain textures because I'm not changing the voltage all the time. For me, the hardest part of this tattoo to get right is the difference between the sharp and the blurry. Being able to create contrast between like sharpness and also create the contrast with the color, and being able to make that all work in one tattoo is the hardest part, because a lot of the time the background will be too light, so I have to improvise and darken certain areas that will help the Michael Jordan piece last longer. You know what I mean? I use Dermalize to heal a lot of my tattoos. Dermalize Pro is a similar product to Second Skin or any products like that. It's like an adhesive bandage. For me, especially for color tattoos, this is the best way of healing, because it's kind of like taking all the vulnerabilities out of it, and it's like a fail-safe for healing. But otherwise, if this isn't around, then I usually say to dry heal for 3 days. No cream, just keep it nice and clean. And after that, apply small amounts of cream just to soften the top layer of skin. I use Inkies aftercare cream, and I use Inkies ointment, Purple Glide also when I tattoo. For me, these products are some of the best in the business, just because they're clean. They've only got a few ingredients, which kind of helps with eliminating allergies or anything like that. And for me, they're just really nice to use, really smooth and go on easy. They're not thick and gluggy. And I use Dermalize Pro just simply because it's one of the best adhesive bandages on the market. It's not too sticky, so it doesn't kind of stick to your skin too much, and it's hypoallergenic. It's just, yeah, some of the most fail-safe products to use. For me, my favorite thing about Intense Ink is the way they heal. For me, I think they heal a lot more natural than any other ink company's inks, and they aid my work in looking more real because of that. I think I got to create my new ink set solely because of the way I tattoo. When I do a portrait, I'll always kind of muddy up colors and dirty up colors in order to make them look more realistic. A lot of artists will try to make everything super bright and vibrant, and I think this takes away from realism. And so I think Intense saw this in my work and wanted to show the world. I mean, it's not all about brightness, you know, it's about creating the right color for the right part of the tattoo. The set's designed for doing realism, but it's mainly designed for helping artists use muddier colors to create realism, so that every color is not super bright and super vibrant. This will aid you in making the piece a little bit more realistic and a little bit more down to earth and not jumping off the skin like it's a cartoon picture. I think this is going to help people better their work because it's going to take out the whole mixing colors to make these sort of tones, and you've already got them to work with. I've been using the same ink brand since the day I started tattooing, and for me it is, I've tried every other ink brand on the market, and for me Intense Tattoo Ink is the best ink on the market. For me it heals the most natural, it sinks into the skin nicely, it very rarely will ever fade too much or stay too bright and too pastel-y looking. It kind of sets a nice natural tone. And I haven't had any healing problems with any of the colors, so for me Intense Tattoo Ink is the best ink. To be honest, most of the time I don't really let it dry. It'll sit for maybe 2 to 5 minutes before I start tattooing. I usually have most of my inks poured out first. If I don't, then I just put the stencil on and then pour out my inks and then start. Because I kind of work from bottom to top and from like I kind of finish as I go, so I don't really touch any other parts of the stencil apart from what I'm working on. I really start with whatever it kind of takes for the start of the tattoo, like whatever's at the bottom. If it's a black area, then it'll be solid packing the black area. If it's like a structural thing I'm tattooing, like a machine or a car or something like this, then I'll use lines to kind of block in shapes so that I don't lose it. Yeah, it just kind of depends on what the piece is and what area I'm starting at. Like I said before, I just kind of work from the bottom up, so I'll always block in areas to the point where I don't need the stencil, and then I'll finish that entire area, and apart from like whites and lights. So I'll do that all the way up the tattoo, so I don't really use any other part of the tattoo until I'm tattooing there. And I also just, you gotta wipe carefully, wipe away from the stencil, and just be thoughtful about where you're wiping and how much you're wiping. It can vary. It depends. If I haven't eaten, sometimes it'll be like an hour, but most of the time it'll be about 3 or 4 hours before I take my first solid break and have lunch and stuff. We might have like little minute stretches or 30-second stretches, but that's just mainly because of me as well, because I need to stretch my back, which is very important. For me, music really helps me tattoo. It kind of helps my creative side, plus it kind of keeps me in the groove. And it's also just to kind of, especially at conventions, just to stop, not being rude, but stop people talking to me too much, just so I can actually focus on work and get work done. But yeah, headphones for me are really important, unless I'm in a studio and then it's just music. Stretching is really important. If you want to pack anything solid or do a really good line, good clean line, the skin needs to be as taut as possible. It's one of the most undone things in tattooing, and I think yeah, everything's solved if you just stretch the skin really well before you start a line or start color packing. It depends what I'm doing. Again, if it's like skin tones, it's always layers, it's never one pass. But I mean, if I'm blocking in blacks or like a solid color, then it'll be just one pass usually. But I always like to do 2 passes on color tattoos, like I mean once they heal, because it just, like, no painting is done in a day, you know, so it just pays to come back and brighten your bright colors, darken your darks, lighten your whites, everything like that, just to make a better piece. Mainly just not to overwork the skin. You have to be able to move quick enough and layer areas, but also saturate at the same time without overworking the skin. I use off-tone colors and muted colors because I feel like it adds to the realism. If everything's really pure and really bright and solid colors, then it's not going to look real. It's just going to look like a wax figure or like too pastel-y. So I think that if you mute the colors down and everything looks really natural and kind of not too bright and over flourished, then it's going to help your realism quite a lot. It's just a mixture of raw umber and a bunch of flesh tones. One of the main ones is Mamba Skin, which is one of my flesh tones from my color set that is getting released. It's pretty much just a mixture of purple silver, raw umber, a little bit of black, a little bit of white, and cacao. So I used to have to make that color every single time I tattoo, so these colors are going to help you a bunch with making those kind of muted skin tones. This really depends on the skin, the customer, how fast you run your machine. I run my machine at 11 volts. I think that it's probably the best voltage for layering because it's not too quick but it's not too slow. But also you just kind of need to watch it. If you can see the skin getting a bit rough, then you definitely need to stop, because if you hit it a couple more times then you're going to damage it. It's a personal preference. I mean, I prefer rotary for what I do, just because it's a lot easier, because I have the cartridge system, so I can click and change needles instantly without having to change machines and change voltage for certain machines. But I used coils for the first 3 years of my career, and I love coils. I absolutely love the feel of being able to tune a machine and make it your own and change how it runs to suit yourself. And for me it's awesome, but it's just hard because I'd need to have 7 machines set up to do one of my tattoos. So it's just easier and convenient to run the injector or a rotary machine, just so that you don't have so much clutter on your table. Plus they're awesome machines. They put ink in really quickly and really efficiently, and they have no noise, so it's kind of nice on your ears, and they're a lot lighter, so it's not bad on your wrists or anything. So personal preference, but I prefer rotary. I always put white in at the end, just because otherwise you're going to stain it with the other dirty colors, but it's going to settle. Sometimes it can settle too much and kind of blend in and not look as vibrant, so I'll always do whites right at the end, really slowly, make sure the skin's super stretched, and then I'll put cream on it and I'll let it sit for about 20 minutes before I take photos, just to get all the redness out and make the brights and whites nice and vibrant. In my opinion, every tattoo needs 2 passes. I mean, if it needs touching up, then touch it up, like healing wise, but even if it healed perfect the first pass, I think you should always do a second pass just to darken darks, lighten your whites, reblend colors, make some colors a bit thicker, add a bit of detail. There's all different things that you can kind of play with it and make it your own a bit more, and also just to make sure that it's gonna hold up a bit better too if you let it heal and rework it, you know. I do prefer to work in one session, but to be honest, working for 12 plus hours is pretty draining, and if you do that 4 or 5 times a week, you're not going to last very long. So I do prefer to break it up, but it depends. Like if it's a face, I don't like to break it up too much because it's tough to get back into the groove of tattooing a face. If it's something else, then it will make it a bit easier on you to do 2 sessions, because you'll let it heal, come back, you'll be able to assess how he heals, see what colors sit well, and it's better for the learning process about learning how your tattoos are healing and everything if you do multiple sessions. You just need to pick somewhere that's easy to stop the tattoo in order to replace it. Like if it's a face, don't stop mid-nose or mid-cheek. Like finish up to the mouth and then re-stencil from there, or finish the face and re-stencil the body. It just makes it easier to replace the stencil and makes your life easier. Definitely not, but it all depends on the client's skin and what I'm doing. If I'm smashing in color quickly, or if I'm slow packing little bits in the face, and so it's all just relative to the part of the tattoo that I'm doing and the customer's skin. But I'll definitely change needle depth throughout the tattoo. To be honest, I never use mixing solution. I'll always mix the colors straight. For me, it feels like it's weakening the pigment, even though it's probably not. It's just kind of a mental thing for me. I prefer just to use the ink. I'll always mix the cap in the tube, like in my needle. I'll be dipping in between caps the whole tattoo to try and mix the color that I want to make. This for me feels a bit more creative, and it's also keeps me on my toes and makes sure that every single mix isn't exactly the same, so I have a little differentiation in between colors. At the moment, I've just been working so much that I'm just tattooing. I'm going to be painting and drawing a lot more soon. I'm going to take some time off tattooing actually for like maybe a month and just focus on painting and drawing for a bit, get back my arts and crafts. If it's fresh and you finish the whole thing, I'll always do it first. I'll always take a photo pretty much straight away after I finish, but like I said before, I'll put cream on it, and I can even wrap it up sometimes in plastic wrap, and just let it sit for maybe 20 minutes, half an hour. This will make it bleed and get all the redness out and make it look nice and vibrant. But otherwise, healed photos are always brilliant to get, especially if they heal well. I always pick out the design. Even if customers send me a really good photo, I'll still look for my own image, just because I kind of know what I like to tattoo and what makes my work look like my work. So I'll always kind of peruse myself and show them like, your photo's really good, but what about this one? Or I think this one would look better in this placement, and because then they feel like you also are having your own creative input as well. Shading for me is, especially if we're talking black and gray shading, it's one of the toughest things in the world. It's all about being as careful as you can, don't go too far with it, kind of leave enough skin. If we're talking color shading, it's about burying your needle but keeping it in the same depth and moving it around in tight circles so that it packs the skin, but then when you're fading out you just get looser and looser. Yeah, pretty much, because there's no point in stenciling it if it's like you can just kind of see. As long as I know where the head's supposed to be and where the body's supposed to be, I just kind of use my eye and use the photo. This just saves time stenciling because those stencils take so damn long to do. It's just time saving and kind of makes it a bit more fun too. You can make them look like people you know. It's super fun. Most of the time, no, unless it's like a big one and I know it's gonna be a good piece, so I get kind of nervous to try and make sure I pull it off. But also I get nervous if I'm tattooing another tattooer or someone who's been tattooed by a lot of really good artists, because that always kind of makes me nervous and makes me think twice about tattooing them. No, I use the Inkject Flight Nano, and it's a very versatile machine. It runs liners, shaders, mags really well. I'm not sure about other machines, but the Inkject Flight Nano is the one for me, and it works with everything. Pretty much just don't be lazy, man. Work your ass off. It's gonna take long to achieve realism. Like, each tattoo is not gonna be done in 5 hours. And just be persistent. Make sure that you push people to do the work you want to do. Never do something if it's gonna, like, I know you gotta pay bills, but never do something if it's not gonna push you artistically or creatively. And if someone gives you an idea and it's not up your alley, try and use the gift of the gab and talk them into it to make it something that you're going to do a really good job at and that is your artwork instead of you conforming to them, because it's just going to be a better piece and they're going to be a lot more happy. I look for just imperfections, I suppose, like everyone else does. I don't really look that much like critically. I just get excited by other artists doing other crazy stuff, you know, which is, for me, when I see an artist doing something insane or something huge, it just kind of pushes me to do better next time, because I'm like, oh, that guy did that, I want to do this. Oh man, my view, I'm not sure. I've only been tattooing 7 years, and for me it's one of the greatest things that ever happened to me, so it's amazing, and the fact that it's growing so big recently is insane. And we're getting recognized as actual artists now, not just kind of gang members or people off the street or criminals, you know. So it's actually getting recognized as an art form, which for me is amazing. My final message for all tattoo artists is no shortcuts. Don't be lazy and work your ass off if you want to get anywhere in this industry.